So in this video, we're going to have a little comparison between the Boss LS2 and the Sonicake Portal. So basically, these devices are AB boxes, and they basically let you kind of feed a signal into it, split it into two different signal paths, and then bring them back together again. So I've had the Boss LS2 for many years now, and the way I've been using this is essentially to help run like a distorted channel and then a clean channel to retain the low end within my bass rig. So yeah, in one of the channels on the LS2, I would have perhaps the Proco Rap 2 or the TS9 Mini, which are pedals that are known to cut out some of your low end. And then in the other channel, you can just run that channel completely empty, not even plug anything into the other channel. But then what you've got is a volume control for kind of like a parallel clean signal. But then what I've been doing much more recently is having like an EQ pedal in that second channel to kind of have a little bit of a low end boost. So you've got low end boost in one channel, distorted tone in the other channel, then you've got a volume control for each, and you can kind of create your distorted bass sound and maintain the low end. So yeah, this caught my attention recently because it's got an extra channel on it. So you can see you've got 3 foot switches here. You've got channel A, B and C. So similar kind of functionality to the LS2 in that you can run, say, a distorted channel through channel A, then a clean channel in channel B and blend them together. But this one also has channel C, which doesn't have a send and a return like the other 2 channels. It's literally just a separate sort of volume control and foot switch for the input signal. So if your input signal is just your clean, unaffected bass tone, you've got a volume control for that. So it does open up a few more possibilities, I suppose, with maybe running, multiple different effects in the A and the B channels if your kind of clean low end signal is being taken care of by channel C. I also was quite interested in this pedal due to the fact that it's got a foot switch for each channel, whereas on the LS2 you've just got the one foot switch and then lots of different modes that let you then switch between different modes and engaging and disengaging different channels. So what we'll do, we'll cut to a little close-up of these pedals in action and kind of show you the different modes and how you can achieve those modes on the 2 different pedals. So let's have a look at that. Okay, we'll just have a little quick look here at all the different modes that you have available on the LS2 and see if you can replicate that with the Portal. So first mode here on the LS2 is just with each press of the foot switch changing between channel A and B. So channel A on the LS2 is the green channel, whereas channel A on the Portal is the red channel. But for sake of comparison, because the green is on the left in both cases, I'm just going to pretend that green is channel A on both. Okay, so yeah, if you wanted to go from channel A to B on the LS2, you just push the foot switch back and forth. You basically just push both foot switches on the Portal to do the same thing. So these foot switches are relatively close together. You can see it's roughly the width of 3 of my fingers there. So I feel like most people's feet are going to be wider than that. So quite easily able to press 2 foot switches at once. The next mode on the LS2 is basically just with each press of the foot switch, activate channel A, bypass. So easy peasy on the Portal, just designated foot switch for that channel. And then there's the exact same function in the next mode, but for the other channel. So yeah, same thing. The next mode on the LS2 cycles from A to B to bypass. And again, you could achieve the exact same thing with the Portal. So one press to activate the green channel. On the Portal, you'd have to step on 2 foot switches, but then you would just do that to change the channel, the red channel, and then one more press to bypass, and then you go through again. The next one is with each press of the foot switch, both channels on, both channels off. So again, you just push both foot switches at the same time on the portal to achieve that mode. So the last mode on the LS2, it's similar to the A to B to bypass in terms of each cycle, or sorry, each press of the foot switch brings up channel A, then channel B, then you bypass. However, the routing in the pedal is slightly different. So whereas the A to B to bypass mode basically goes the loop of A, then the loop of B, and then bypass. On the output select mode, the last mode here on the LS2, it's essentially input just the send of A, and then just the send of B, and then bypass. So it essentially doesn't include the return of the LS2. And I think this is potentially the mode that people use if they've got a different amp coming out, or I guess they're feeding a different amp from send A and send B. So they might be, bypassing, maybe going to amp number 1, then they're going to amp number 2, then they're going to amp number 3. I think that's how people use that mode. Whether or not you can replicate this on the portal, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that if you just didn't have anything connected to the return in the loops on the ins and outs on the back of the pedal, if you just activated that channel, you'd send your output to one amp, then you'd send it to the other amp, and then you'd be sending it to the other amp. So I'm not too sure why this mode exists. I wonder if someone could maybe let me know in the comments down below, because I would have thought even if you're in this mode, A to B to bypass, which incorporates the full loop, the send and the return, if nothing's connected to the return, I don't understand how these two modes are different from each other. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below if I've missed something there and there is two distinct scenarios where these two modes are necessary. So with all of this in mind, I do think that having a foot switch for each channel is a bit of an advantage. I do feel like the Portal has a little bit of an edge over the LS2 in that sense, just because let's say you wanted both channels on, you can do that on both, but then if you just want to turn one of those channels off, you can do that on the Portal. But in order to turn one of the channels off on the LS2, you have to change the mode. So it's just a bit impractical to kneel down and then go, okay, let's change the mode and just have that channel coming on and off, or that channel coming on and off. So I do think that having a foot switch for each channel is a big advantage here, especially given that they are close enough that you can push them both at the same time with one foot. I guess one other advantage the Portal has over the LS2 is this third foot switch, that blue channel there. So you've got the red channel for the send and return on channel A, you've got the green channel for the send and return on channel B, and then the blue, the third channel here, is basically just giving you a volume control for the input signal. So if you're looking to say use this maybe as I am on a bass rig, you're running maybe a distortion signal in one channel, and then you want some clean low end in the other channel. In the LS2, that has to be your other channel, whereas on the Portal you could just use this third channel here, the blue channel, and increase the volume or decrease the volume of just your unaffected clean bass tone. And then you've got another channel here that you could play around with, and maybe you could put a different distortion in each channel, and run two different distortions in parallel, or using the A/B switch here, you could run them in series, feeding channel A into channel B. Whereas on the LS2, I guess, you know, if you're running a distortion in one channel, you're then basically forced to use the other channel as your parallel clean blend. So you can just have, you know, nothing connected. So if I had, you know, send and return of channel A going in and out of a distortion pedal, you could essentially just leave send and return on channel B disconnected, and then you've basically just got a volume control for your clean bass tone. Whereas, as I said, you know, you have that option with the blue channel here on the Portal, but then you've got another channel that you can play around with and put some other effects in and get a bit more creative perhaps. So one other difference between these two pedals is that the Portal allows you to, with this little switch here, change between running channels A and B in parallel or in series. So that's not something that you have the option of doing on the LS2. As I say, I tend to basically leave it in parallel mode. I like having that sort of clean low end and then distorted signal running together. But yeah, in terms of versatility and options, you've obviously got an additional option here with the Sonicake. And then I suppose one other thing to just mention is, you know, price. So the Boss LS2 seems to be roughly £100 plus or minus £5 to £10 looking around online just now. The Sonicake Portal is probably closer to £40 plus or minus £5 depending on where you get it from. So yeah, quite a difference in price there. Durability wise, obviously we all know Boss is fantastic in terms of durability. These things are sort of really well made, pretty much indestructible. I've had mine for probably somewhere between 7 and 10 years and it's been absolutely fine, no issues whatsoever. I've only owned the Portal for maybe a month, so hard to really comment on the durability in that side of things, but you know, it feels quite well made. So yeah, I don't have any concerns over its build quality, put it that way. So while I feel that the Portal perhaps has a slight advantage in terms of maybe versatility, kind of functionality, user interface, if you want to call it that, with regards to turning each channel on and off independently, being able to activate multiple channels at once. You've also got the option to run in parallel or series with the Portal. You only get one option for series. You have to go A into B. But I guess, you know, if you're thinking out your pedals and what you want to stack in series, then that shouldn't be a problem. But I guess the main sort of criticism I have of the Portal are the inputs and outputs. So with the LS2, they're kind of running along the side edge there, the 3 on each side. You've got your overall input and output, and then you know, send and return for A and B, and then you've got some power inputs across the top. Everything's just across the top on the Portal. So you've got your 2 power connectors, similar to the LS2. The far left and far right are going to be your overall input and output from the pedal. But then your send and return for channel A and B are kind of sort of offset, kind of zigzagging across the back there, which basically brings those closer together and does make it harder to get patch leads into it. So obviously patch leads come in lots of different shapes and sizes. You know, for example, you've got these sort of fairly cheap ones, relatively slim in that direction, but you know, quite wide in that direction. If you try to use one of these in the back, you are not going to have a good time. So if you see I've plugged that in there, you basically can't get anything into the 2 inputs and outputs either side of that one. Even like a relatively slim, perhaps, you know, higher quality patch lead, something like this, you know, still quite slim in that direction as well, not too much width to it. Even those, they end up coming fairly close to the neighboring connections as well. And again, perhaps just to show you another example, you know, again, something that's relatively slim in that sort of dimension, but maybe has a little bit more width to it. Again, if you plug that in, it's a little bit better, but you're still potentially closing off the space to plug in your next patch lead. The cables that I found actually work best in this Sonicake Portal out of the ones that I have are these really kind of cheap ones, just because they don't have a huge amount of width in all the right directions. So you plug one of those in, you probably do have space to plug in, you know, the other side of it next to it. And I suppose one other thing with respect to all of these inputs and outputs is, I guess in connection more so to the overall dimensions of the pedal. So I guess this kind of depends on what kind of pedal board you have. But with, say, the pedal train style of pedal board where you've got, I guess, a couple of parallel kind of bars with gaps in between, I feel like this would benefit from being a little bit kind of sort of taller in that direction, because if you're using right angled patch leads, that basically, that top edge of the pedal basically has to be flush with one of those strips on the pedal board, so that the cables then have a chance to run underneath and go wherever you need to put them. But with that being flush to the edge of one of those pedal board bars, the pedal doesn't extend that far this way. So you've basically got, I don't know how easy this is going to be to show, you've basically got the bar of the pedal board running kind of centrally underneath here, and it's not really supporting the bottom edge of the pedal where the foot switches are. So you've kind of got, it almost feels like you've got the foot switch on a bit of a seesaw. You then push the foot switch and it almost feels like it's not particularly well supported. If you have one of those pedal boards where it's, say, just like a flat board with no holes in it, I just don't think you can use right angle jacks with this unless you're happy to have all the cables kind of poking up like that. You might need to find patch leads that have kind of straight connectors instead of right angle connectors. So that would be, I guess, my main criticism of the Portal. I think as an overall summary, I do prefer the the options that you have. I prefer the kind of user interface, as it were, with having a foot switch for each channel. But this is a smaller pedal, and the inputs and outputs are probably better spaced out by comparison. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, my little comparison video between these two pedals. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and if you've got any questions, pop them down as well, and I'll see if I can answer those for you. All right, thank you very much.